Part 16. Erupting from the crown of clouds, the Nostromo burst into open space. 1 minute, 50 seconds later, the surface gravity indicator on Dallas's console fell to 0. That was the signal for some unprofessional but heartfelt cheering on the bridge. We made it. Ripley lay exhausted against the padded back of her flight seat. Damn, we made it. When the first tremor hit and we started velocity slide, I didn't think we were going to. Dallas husked. I saw us splattering ourselves all over the nearest hillside. We might as well have done that if we'd had to go to hyper and lost the refinery. Nothing to worry about. Lambert wasn't smiling. We could have landed again and stayed there. Then our automatic distress beacon would have come on. We could have relaxed in hypersleep while some other lucky crew got itself kicked out of the freezers to come and rescue us. Don't mention anything about bonuses yet, Dallas was telling himself. Surprise them with it when you wake up in Earth orbit. But for now, the engineering team was at least entitled to some verbal commendation. He addressed the comm. Nice work, you two. How's she holding? Now that we're out of that dust, she's purring like Jones. A sharp, crackly noise sounded over the speaker. Dallas frowned for a second, unable to place it. Then he realized that Parker had probably opened a beer while inadvertently holding it within range of the pickup. It was a walk in the park. The engineer continued pridefully. When we fix something, it stays fixed. A gurgling sound filled the speaker, as if Parker was submerging. Sure it was. A good job, Dallas assured him. Take a break. You've both earned it. And Parker? Yo. When we raise Earthside and you're coordinating your department with engineering control, keep your beer away from the mic. The gurgling noise receded. Satisfied, Dallas switched off and said to no one in particular, Let's pick up the money and go home. Put her in the garage, Lambert. The Nostromo's angle of ascent began to flatten. Several minutes passed before a steady beeping began to sound from a telltale above the navigator's station. Here she comes, she informed her companions. Right where she's supposed to be. Okay. Dallas was thumbing controls. Line us up and stand by to dock. Instrumentation hummed as the tug adjusted its attitude with respect to the mountain of metal and plastic. Ripley threw a switch, and the tug locked itself in position, backside first, to the dull mass of the refinery. Positioned, she said. Bring us in. Dallas watched a certain readout intently, fingers poised over a rank of red buttons. We're moving. Ripley's attention was focused on 2 screens at once. Distance shrinking. 20. 15. Set. She hit a switch. Dallas depressed the red controls. Engines cut and primaries compensated for. We have inertial stability. Activate the hyperdrive lock. Activated, Ripley informed him. We're tied together. When activated now, the Nostromo would generate a hyperdrive field of sufficient size to include the refinery. It would travel with them, enveloped in that mysterious manifestation of non-reality that enabled ships and men to travel faster than light. Set course for Earth, Dallas ordered crisply. Then fire up the big one and get us up to light +4, Ripley. With pleasure. Course computed and locked in, said Lambert a moment later. Time to go home. Then to herself, "Feats, get me out of here." Ripley touched a major control. The tiny world and its imprisoned alien ship vanished as though it had never existed. The Nostromo achieved, then exceeded, the speed of light. A corona effect materialized around the ship and the refinery. Stars ahead of them became blue, those behind shifted to red. 6 crew members raced relievedly for home. 6 crew members and something else named Cain. They sat around the mess table and sipped coffee, tea, or other warm liquid stimulants according to taste and habit. Their relaxed postures reflected their current state of mind, which until recently had been stiff as glass and twice as fragile. Now legs sprawled unconcernedly over their chair arms and backs slumped against cushions. Lambert was still up on the bridge, making final course checks before she'd permit herself the luxury of collapsing. Ash was down in the infirmary, keeping watch over Cain. The executive officer and his condition were the principal topic of conversation. Parker downed steaming tea, smacked his lips indelicately, and proposed with his usual confidence, "The best thing to do is just freeze him. Arrest the goddamn disease." "We don't know that freezing will alter his condition in any way," Dallas argued. "It might make him worse. What affects Earthside diseases might only intensify whatever this is that has got a hold on him. It's a damn sight better than doing nothing." Parker waved the cup like a baton. "And that's what the Autodoc's done for him so far. Nothing. Whatever he's got is beyond its capability to handle, just like Ash said. That medical computer set up to handle things like zero-G sickness and broken bones, not something like this. We all agree Cain needs specialized help, which you just admitted we can't offer him." "Right." Parker leaned back in his chair. "Exactly. So I say we freeze him until we get back home and a doc specializing in alien diseases can run over him." "Right," added Brett. Ripley shook her head, looked put upon. "Whenever he says anything, you say, 'Right.' You know that, Brett?" He grinned. "Right." She turned to face the engineer. "What do you think about that, Parker? Your staff just follows you around and says, 'Right,' like regular parrots." Parker turned to his colleague. "Yeah, shape up. What are you? Some kind of parrot?" "Right." "Oh, knock it off." Dallas was sorry for the unthinking comment. A little levity would do them some good, and he had to up and step on it. Why did he have to be like that? The relationships among the tug's crew were more informal ones among equals than a boss and employee type of chain of command. So why did he all of a sudden feel compelled to play captain? Perhaps because they were in a crisis situation of sorts, and someone had to officially be in charge. He was stuck with the responsibility. Lousy job. Right now, he'd much rather have Ripley's or Parker's. Especially Parker's. The 2 engineers could squat back in their private cubicle and blithely ignore everything that didn't directly affect them. So long as they kept the engines and ship systems functioning, they were answerable to no one save each other. It occurred to Dallas that he didn't particularly like making decisions. Maybe that was why he was commanding an old tug instead of a liner. More revealingly, maybe that was why he never complained about it. As tug captain, he could spend most of his ship time in hypersleep, doing nothing but dreaming and collecting his salary. He didn't have to make decisions in hypersleep. Soon, he assured himself, soon they could all return to the private comforts of their individual coffins. The needles would come down, the sporifix would enter their veins and numb their brains, and they would drift pleasantly away to the land where decisions no longer had to be made, and the unpleasant surprises of a hostile universe could not intrude. As soon as they finished their coffee. "Cain will have to go into quarantine," he said absently, sipping at his mug. "Yeah, and so will we." Ripley looked dismayed at the thought. That was understandable. They would travel all the way back to Earth, only to spend weeks in isolation until the medics were convinced that none of them harbored anything similar to what had flattened Cain. Visions of green grass underfoot and blue skies filled her mind. She saw a beach and a blissfully ground-bound little town on the coast of El Salvador. It was painful to have to force them out. Eyes turned as a new figure joined them. Lambert looked tired and depressed. "How about a little something to lower your spirits?" she told them. "Thrill me." Dallas tried to prepare himself mentally for what he suspected was coming. He knew what the navigator had remained on the bridge to work out. "According to my calculations, based on the time spent getting to and from that unscheduled stop we made, the amount of time spent making the detour—" "Give me the short version," Dallas said, interrupting her. "We know we went off course to trace that signal. How long to Earth?" She finished drawing a cup of coffee for herself, slumped into a chair, and said sadly, 10 months. Christ. Ripley stared at the bottom of her cup. Clouds and grass and beach receded farther in her mind, blended into a pale blue-green haze, well out of reach. True, 10 months in hypersleep was little different from a month, but their minds worked with real time. Ripley would rather have heard 6 months instead of the projected 10. The intercom beeped for attention, and Dallas acknowledged. "What's up, Ash?" "Come see Cain right away." The request was urgently phrased, yet with a curious hesitancy to it. Dallas sat up straight, as did the others at the table. "Some change in his condition? Serious?" "It's simpler if you just come see him." There was a concerted rush for the corridor. Coffee remained steaming on the deserted table. Horrible visions clouded Dallas's thoughts as he made his way down to the infirmary with the others trailing behind. What gruesome after-effects had the alien disease produced in the exec? Dallas imagined a swarm of tiny grey hands, their single eyes shining wetly, crawling possessively over the infirmary walls, or some leprous fungus enveloping the rotting corpse of the luckless Cain. They reached the infirmary, panting from the effort of running down corridor and companionways. There was no cluster of replicated alien hands crawling on the walls, no alien growth, fungoid or otherwise, decorated the body of the executive officer. Ash had greatly understated the matter when he'd reported a change in Cain's condition. The exec was sitting up on the medical platform. His eyes were open and clear, functioning in proper concert with his brain. Those eyes turned to take in the knot of gaping arrivals. "Cain?" Lambert couldn't believe it. "Are you all right?" "He looks fine," she thought dazedly, as though nothing had ever happened. "You want anything?" asked Ripley when he did not respond to Lambert's query. mouths dry. Dallas abruptly remembered what Cain, in his present state, reminded him of. A man just coming out of amnesia. The exec looked alert and fit, but puzzled for no particular reason, as though he was still trying to organize his thoughts. "Can I have some water?" Ash moved quickly to a dispenser, drew a plastic cupful, and handed it to Cain. The exec downed it in a single long swallow. Dallas noted absently that muscular coordination seemed normal. The hand-to-mouth drinking movements had been performed instinctively, without forethought. While enormously gratifying, the situation was ridiculous. There had to be something wrong with him. "More," was all Cain said, continuing to act like a man in complete control of himself. Ripley found a large container, filled it brim full, and handed it to him. He downed the contents like a man who'd just spent 10 years wandering the deserts of Pyolin, then sagged back on the padded platform, panting. "Terrible. What happened to me?" "You don't remember?" Ash said. So, Dallas told himself with satisfaction. The amnesia analogy was nearer the mark than he'd suspected. Cain winced slightly, more from muscles cramping from disuse than anything else, and took a deep breath. "I don't remember a thing. I can barely remember my name." "Just for the record, and the medical report," asked Ash professionally, "what is your name?" "Cain. Thomas Cain." "That's all you remember?" "For the moment." He let his gaze travel slowly over the assembly of anxious faces. "I remember all of you, though I can't put names to you yet." "You will," Ash assured him confidently. "You recall your own name and you remember faces. That's a good start. Also, a sign that your loss of memory isn't absolute." "Do you hurt?" Surprisingly, it was the stoic Parker who asked the first sensitive question. "All over. Feels like somebody's been beating me with a stick for about 6 years. He sat up on the pallet again, swung his legs over the side, and smiled. "God, am I hungry? How long was I out?" Dallas continued to stare at the apparently unharmed man in disbelief. "Couple of days. You sure you don't have any recollection of what happened to you?" "Nope, not a thing." "What's the last thing you remember?" Ripley asked him. "I don't know." "You were with Dallas and me on a strange planet exploring. Do you remember what happened there?" Cain's forehead wrinkled as he tried to battle through the mists obscuring his memories. Real remembrances remained tantalizingly out of reach, realization a painful, incomplete process. "Just some horrible dream about smothering. Where are we now? Still on the planet?" Ripley shook her head. "No, I'm delighted to say. We're in hyperspace, on our way home." "Getting ready to go back in the freezers," Brett added feelingly. He was as anxious as the others to repair the mindless protection of hypersleep, anxious for the nightmare that had forced itself on them to be put in suspension, along with their bodies. Though looking at the revitalized Cain made it hard to reconcile their memories with the image of the alien horror he'd brought aboard, the petrified creature was there for anyone to inspect, motionless in its stasis tube. "I'm all for that," Cain said readily. "Feel dizzy and tired enough to go into deep sleep without the freezers." He looked around the infirmary wildly. Right now, though, I'm starving. I want some food before we go under. I'm pretty hungry myself. Parker's stomach growled indelicately. It's tough enough coming out of hypersleep without your belly rumbling. Better if you go under with a full stomach. Makes it easier coming out. I won't argue that. Dallas felt some sort of celebration was in order. In the absence of partying material, a final pre-sleep feast would have to do. We could all use some food. One meal before bed.